Hi class, in this video I'm going to go over Unit 6, Classical Music. In this video you should be able to identify different forms of classical music from this time period and tell me about some of the characteristics of the classical music style. Now when I talk about classical music, I'm not talking about what you hear on a classical radio station. Classical music was a time period, although we often use the word to encompass the genre. But when this video in this unit, we're talking about the time period, not the genre. Most of what you're going to listen to in class this semester is from the genre. This is the time period. So what is happening during history at this time? First thing we get the Age of Enlightenment. So education's on the rise, literacy is on the rise, math and science are on the rise. Lots of technological innovations are happening and the world is changing. We have the French Revolution, so we have this challenging of authority and power and this shift happening. We also have the American Revolution, once again, this challenging of authority and power and a shift in the status quo. Because of all these changes, musicians were influenced too, and the way music was developed and produced changed. Instead of having this patronage system where you worked for one person and you were part of their court and you were part of essentially one of their servants creating music for them at their request, it started to become more, I'm going to do this for me. I'm going to be self-employed and I'm going to do what I want to do. Mozart was one of the people who kind of started doing this as well, kind of changed this idea of I don't have to work for just you. I can work for me and other people too. So there's this challenging of authority. And because of this, like I said, composers are writing what they want to write instead of what somebody else wants them to write. Of course, they're still doing commissions, meaning people are paying them to write a certain kind of music or music for a specific occasion, but that is not the entirety of their work anymore. So I want you to answer on your Ed puzzle. How did historical events influence how music was produced? Some things that were extremely common for this classical time period. It is simplicity and clarity. Before this, we were in the Baroque and things are crazy ornamented, crazy out there, all about showing off your ability. Well, this is all about clean lines and simplicity. So we get some changes in our harmonic progressions. We get very simple bass lines that accompanied simple melodies. Nothing crazy out there, just clean lines. We get the Alberti bass, which is this repeated patterns, short repeated pattern of notes. Once again, very simple, very clean, keeps coming back. We get absolute music. This is music for music's sake. Before this point, we're talking a lot about sacred music, or we're talking about program music. So things that we are written for a reason. We're going to talk about this thing. We're going to talk about this emotion. We're going to talk about this event. We're going to talk about whatever. This is just, I wanted to write music, so I wrote music. Think of this like Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. I wrote music. Sounds good. That's absolute music. There's less improvisation. Last time period, lots of improvisation and ornamentation and adding to the music. This time period, it's very much keep it the way the composer wrote it. Don't add to it. Keep it the way it was meant to be. We also get the rise of the amateur. Before this point in time, you were either a professional or the amateurs. Those were people who were singing in like their community church or with their friends. But we get more people who are literate, more people who are reading music and taking music lessons and learning how to play instruments. So we get the rise of the amateur. More everyday people are participating in the music making process and music writing process than before. So tell me, what type of phrasing was favored in classical music? Would they have preferred very long, drawn out, continuous phrases? Would they have preferred short, simple, symmetrical phrases? Or phrases that allowed for lots of improvisation and ornamentation? You tell me. We have several styles that arose during the classical period. We get style galant, which is very light-hearted. We came from this very heavy style of the Baroque period with like I said, lots of ornamentation, lots of crazy stuff happening on it. It's very graceful and simple. We get the classical symphony. And before we had symphonies, but the classical period really nailed down, this is the symphony. This is the format that we're going to follow. We've got a formula. We're going to stick to our formula. We're going to do this every single time, or most every time. We get the sonata form, which is the ABA form. I'm going to talk about that more in just a second. And we also get the mass is formed during this time. Of course, mass being a church service, a Christian church service, but the format for music for mass was kind of solidified and developed during this time. Now, for our classical symphony, our first movement of a symphony, remember symphonies are made up of movements, so multiple pieces of music together to create one whole, like chapters in a book. So our first movement is usually a fast tempo, oftentimes that sonata ABA form. Our second music is either sonata or theme and variations. Theme and variations meaning you change one little thing each time you play the same melody. So this time, these instruments are going to play it. Oh, this time we're going to play it faster. This time we're going to play it up an octave. It just, you change something about it each time. The third movement, it's often in triple meter, so a waltz form. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That nice waltzy form, so dance. Later on, it was replaced by scherzo. They liked to change things up from time to time. We also get some of these minuets, these dances. It's a dance section. And the fourth movement, we're going to end on a nice, fast, jaunty tempo. This is either rondo or sonata form. Once again, they really liked sonata form. That was a favorite. So tell me, what is the form of a classical symphony? Tell me, is it A, exposition, development, recapitulation? Is it B, rondo, sonata, slower, sonata? Is it C, sonata, slower, minuet or scherzo, and then rondo or sonata? You tell me. Big thing to remember when you take your quiz on Friday is I want you to remember how many parts of the symphony are there, how many movements are there typically. So count it. One of these options has 3, the other 2 have 4. So think about that. That's the number I want you to remember. Now we're going to talk about that sonata form, that ABA form. So A is our first theme. I'm going to use Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star for this. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. That's A. That's our A. Nice. This is our theme. This is what we're talking about. Sometimes there's a couple of themes that you're going to do in A, and they just kind of bounce back and forth. Depends on what the composer wanted to do, how exciting the composer wanted to be. Then we get the development. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Different from A, very clearly different from A, but development. Think about this in terms of story. Exposition, A, we're starting the story, we're giving you the information. Development, the things are happening. This is like the action. And then recapitulation. This is A again. Sometimes A prime, you altered a little bit, added a little bit of ornamentation, maybe. So sometimes you'll see A prime, a little dash on the top. And then you go back. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. So A, B, and then A. Sometimes you'll get a coda. This is optional. It's just that short little extension. You're just going to take some measures from your A, and you're just going to embellish it a little bit just to give it a nice little flair to the closing. And that would be your coda. It's your bonus. So tell me, true or false? The order of sonata form is exposition, development, recapitulation. So A, B, A, yes, but what are they called? Parts of the Mass. I told you that the Mass, it was around, it's the church service, the Christian church service, but the format was developed. We go in this order. Most Masses that were written are written follow this order: Kyrie, Sanctus, Gloria, Credo, and Agnus Dei. And they match up with the different offices of the church service. And so there were parts of music that were developed on these themes. So if you are to listen to a mass, I'm not saying like walking into church and listening to just like their everyday music. A composed mass where the whole mass has been thought out. This is typically the form they're going to follow. Let's talk about some composers. Here are your main three from this time period: Mozart, Haydn, and Beethoven. You've probably heard of them before. These are the big guys of this time period. So Mozart was a child prodigy, known for his operas, also known as being a virtuoso pianist. He started really young. He wrote some of his early pieces as a very young child. We're talking like kindergarten, first grade age, very young. He was considered a genius, but he was not the most graceful person to be around. He was kind of rude. So there's some historical accounts of him that are not the best because he was considered a very rude individual. Then we get Haydn. He did not make a lot of money during his time period. He was broke. People didn't love his music during his time. It wasn't until after he passed that that money was being made on his music. So he had a lot of tragedies that followed him through life that really affected the music that he wrote. During his time, he did write national anthems for both Austria and Germany, and he was well known for his symphonies. But like I said, he didn't make a lot of money on his music during his time. We also get Beethoven, this crazy looking person right here, and he's known for his symphonies as well, but also well known for his piano compositions. The piano was developed into its final form during this time period, and he helped to build that, and instrumental in creating that. He became deaf later in life, about middle age, and he continued to write symphonies out of that. He was so good at audiation, aka singing in your head, that he could write music and look at it and know what it should sound like, even though he couldn't actually hear. He also could feel the vibrations of the tones, and he had internalized those vibrations so well that he could still hear and he could still tell if you were not in pitch because the vibration wasn't correct. So tell me, in contrast to composers who worked under the patronage system in the service of nobility or religious institutions, what do composers like Beethoven rely on to make their living? So how did they make their money? Was it from the Pope? Was it from music publishing companies or patrons and commissions? So classical music, big thing I want you to remember. I want you to remember how many movements are in a classical symphony, 4. And I really want you to remember that classical music is a time period, not just a genre. Remember, if you ever need me, please contact me. I'm here for you. Have a great day, guys.